Hi, sweet beans. Welcome back to Wild Geese. I'm your host, Anna. And I got a fancy new microphone. I'm very excited about it. I did elect not to get an arm for it because I kind of just hate the way that the microphone arms look, and I like to just hold the microphone. The thing I didn't realize about this microphone, though, is that it's incredibly heavy, so I might have to get an arm for it. Anyway, who cares? That's where we're at with the audio situation. I hope it sounds better this time. But today we are talking about sensuality and poetry. When I first put the topic ideas out there on Instagram for this episode, I had poetry and sensuality as two separate topics, and y'all voted for sensuality. But as I got into the research for this episode, I actually realized that poetry and sensuality are very, very intertwined. I would say that poetry is an incredibly sensual practice, and I would say that sensuality is a poetic way of life. So I was already thinking about how these topics might become intertwined. And then Andrea Gibson, the person that got me into poetry and spoken word and taught me how to stay tender in the face of heartbreak, passed away this week. And I mourned them as if they were a family member. I don't know. I really, really felt that. So it became clear to me very quickly after getting that news that I want this episode to be some sort of tribute to them. And if you don't think of yourself as a poet or you've never quite gotten into poetry, I strongly believe that not enough people realize that they are poets. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about a sort of note-taking, journaling exercise that has helped me see the poetry in other people lately. And, I've never really truly felt like I've been able to pick up a journaling practice, but actually the other day I found that Katie Dalbett, the host of the podcast Let It Out, actually has an entire course on journal writing that you can find on Craftsy, which is the sponsor of this video. Craftsy is your online resource for all things creative. It offers more than 2,000 exciting classes in more than 20 categories, like crochet, knitting, painting, photography, cake decorating, woodworking, and more. I've personally been working on a little bit of a side quest to get into drawing. I've always thought that I'm terrible at drawing, but that's just not true. Drawing is a skill set that you can build up over time. And the other day I went out to the park with a friend to try to draw the trees around us, and I realized how hard it is to draw trees. So I went home and I found that Ethan Culleton has a class called Learn to Draw Trees from Sketch to Masterpiece, and I saw immediate improvements after practicing with that course. Anytime you feel inspired to pick up a new hobby, Craftsy's there for you. I felt supported in picking crochet back up, learning how to draw, and becoming more consistent with my journaling practice. The first 1,000 of you to click the link in the video description or scan this QR code will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49. This is valid for new members only. Happy crafting. Okay, so as soon as I said the word sensuality, what did you think about? Because it would make sense if you immediately thought about something that actually has more to do with sexuality, because the two terms are used interchangeably, even though they mean very different things. The thing that originally got me thinking about sensuality was that I was on the train one night listening to Sofia Azella, and then when I got off the train, I had this overwhelming urge to just walk really slowly with the music. Don't worry, there were not a ton of people around. I was not being one of those annoying walkers. But usually when I'm walking down the street in New York City, I feel so much pressure to be like the perfect distance away from people. And the reason why I'm walking so fast actually has less to do with the fact that I'm like genuinely in a rush and more to do with the fact that I feel like if I'm too close behind the person, I'm freaking that person out. And if there's someone too close behind me, they're freaking me out. So I'm always kind of playing this game of like trying to be the perfect distance away from people as I'm walking. And that usually results in me walking very, very fast. But anyway, that's so irrelevant. This night, though, I decided to deliberately walk slowly, and just walking slowly. Like, there was nothing else I changed about the way that I was experiencing the world. I was just slowing down my walk. And suddenly, also the music itself, very sexy. So you've got the hearing sense of like hearing this like sexy music, and then the felt sense of slowing down. And those two things together made me feel very sexy. And then I thought to myself, like, oh, sensuality. Like, I feel like sensual. I would like to talk more about sensuality. So that's what got me going down this road. So even I, when I was thinking about sensuality, was thinking about it in a way that's very intertwined with like sexuality and sexiness. But the word sensual actually comes from the late Latin sensualis. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that means endowed with feeling, carnal, concerning the body, in distinction from the spirit or the intellect. So you can have a sensual experience that has nothing to do with sex or sexuality, but it does make sense that these two things are intertwined, because I think that sexuality is a very potent entry point to sensuality, but it's absolutely not the only entry point to sensuality. And actually the YouTuber Heaven Sent Honey, who a lot of you also watch, and if you you haven't seen her stuff already, you should go check her out, has a video called Sensualism, Being Sensual is a Lifestyle. And she put it so beautifully and plainly in saying, to live a sensual life is to develop a masterful sensitivity. But then she says, a sensual life is filled with pleasure and desire, which I agree with. But I don't actually think that sensualism and sensuality is all about pleasure and desire. And this brings me to Andrea Gibson. I want to zero in on this idea of masterful sensitivity because I actually think that that encapsulates so much of what Andrea Gibson's life was. And one of the poems that I have always come back to by Andrea that I feel like blew doors open inside of me when I was younger is called Royal Heart. And I'm going to read some of it. I'm not going to read all of it. I highly encourage you to go check it out. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Spotify. You can even just go read it. I do think that actually hearing Andrea say these words out loud, though, is incredibly impactful. But this is the end of the poem. They say, just to be clear, I don't want to get out without a broken heart. I intend to leave this life so shattered there better be 1,000 separate heavens for all of my separate parts. And none of those parts are going to be wearing the romance from the overpriced vintage rack. This is to say, I am not going to get a single speed bike if I can't make it up the hill. I know exactly how many gears I'm going to need to love you well, and none of them look hip at the coffee shop. They all have God saying, good job. You're finally not full of bullshit. You finally met someone who's going to flatten your kneecaps into skipping stones. Baby, throw me. Throw me as far as I can go. I don't want to leave this life without ever having come home. And I want to come home to you. I can figure out the rain. I feel like I heard that poem and it has led me in life. It's funny. I feel like I've seen a couple of posts on who knows where, Substack, who knows, where people are kind of talking about how you can consume all of the self-help content in the world and it just can't replace poetry. It just can't. Like, I've gone through periods in my life where I've consumed so much self-help and none of it has seeped into me and actually genuinely changed what I believe and changed how I see the world in the same way that poetry like that does. And it's also funny, when I was reading this poem, I remembered, like, I think around the time that I found this poem, I mean, my sense of time and memories is all messed up, so who knows how close together these two things were. But in high school or like maybe late middle school is when I started to really get into Andrea Gibson stuff and spoken word in general. And I can't remember which came first or second, hearing this poem or hearing my mom say something very similar. Like, I have such a vivid memory of getting into my first real relationship in high school, and like a day after I told my mom, probably, I remember her coming to me at the kitchen table and like putting a newspaper article in front of me, which is so funny because like we don't read the newspaper. Like, I don't remember my mom reading newspapers growing up, but I do specifically remember it was a newspaper article, and she put this newspaper article in front of me, and I don't remember what the newspaper article said, but she basically told me, like, don't protect yourself from heartbreak. Let whatever this is be what it is and experience it fully without being afraid of what's to come. And I remember, you know, when you're a teenager and things like that feel sort of like embarrassing and too vulnerable. And I remember kind of being like, why is she talking about heartbreak? Like, I'm at the beginning of love. I'm not thinking about heartbreak, which is so funny because that just shows you I didn't really know heartbreak yet. Once you know heartbreak, you're definitely thinking about heartbreak when you're falling in love. But intuitively, I think I heard this poem after my mom said that to me, because when my mom said that to me, I didn't fully understand what she meant. And then when I heard this poem, I did. Anyway, that's just kind of an aside, but I think it does really exemplify this idea that, like, so many people don't realize that they are poets. Like, my mom gave this wisdom to me too. She just didn't deliver it through spoken word poetry. But anyway, I think that sensuality, being this masterful sensitivity, has to come with an embrace of pain, because pain is a sense. Usually when we think about the senses, we think of 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. And there are different like methods of neurological classifications. Some people say that we have up to like 20 something senses, but I'm going to talk about 4 more senses that we don't talk about very often. One is thermoception, which is the sense of heat. Some people say that the sense of cold is a separate sense. There's nociception, which is the perception of pain. Equilibrioception, which is the perception of balance. and proprioception, which is the perception of body awareness. So like if you close your eyes and touch your nose, that's proprioception. You're aware of your own body. There's an eco-psychologist named Michael J. Cohen who breaks it down into 4 separate categories. Number 1 is the radiation senses. So these are things like your perception of color, temperature, your sense of moods associated with color, the feeling senses, which is your sensitivity to like gravity, air, motion, the chemical senses, which are like hormonal senses, pheromones, hunger for food, water, air, and then mental senses, so things like pain, internal or external, spiritual distress, your sense of self. But I for sure wanted to bring in those 4 extra senses that we don't really talk about as being senses, because I think when we collapse sensuality into being your sense of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, and touching, and getting more in touch with those things in pursuit of pleasure, we're leaving out the fact that pain is a sense that you have to open yourself up to feeling in order to feel a full sense of pleasure. And I think this was Andrea Gibson's like whole thesis in life. Like one of the pinned posts on their Instagram, I'm just going to go ahead and play here because I think it exemplifies this need to stop protecting yourself so fiercely from pain and kind of takes it out of the poetic language a little bit.
5 counterintuitive mental health tips that changed my life. 1, if you want to feel less fear, if you want less anxiety, stop trying to keep yourself safe. Stop chronically trying to protect yourself. 2, if you want to be happier, wholeheartedly welcome your grief. 3, if you feel like your life is lacking something, if you're struggling to feel abundant, put your attention on what you have to give. 4, if you're feeling out of control, stop trying to control things. And finally, 5, what was 5? Oh, if you're struggling to feel loved, if you're feeling unloved, love. Just love, 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 love.
In the last few years of Andrea's life, they talked a lot about moving through pain and what happens when you accept it as a part of life. And there's a YouTube video that I'll have linked where Andrea was being interviewed about, what it's like to be actively dying. And like logically, we know that we are all actively dying all the time, but your experience in life does change when you get a serious diagnosis and you come face to face with your mortality in a way that most of us are constantly trying to run from, right? And they were talking about how their whole life they had experienced this deep depression and resistance against their life. And then when they got this diagnosis, it's like all of those walls just came down. And they realized that everyone around them had this desperation to arrive at a new place. And that actually acted as a wall between getting there. And this is a direct quote. They said they realized it was just about, and this is something everybody can do, you're just consistently letting down your guard. It's not about retrieving anything. It's not about adding anything. It is literally about letting go. And when I'm thinking about this in relation to sensuality, it's really interesting because sensuality is so often used as this marketing tactic to get us to add more to our life, like how to get in touch with your sense of smell, get this fancy perfume, how to get in touch with your sense of touch, buy this fancy lingerie, how to get in touch with your sense of hearing, buy these fancy new headphones. And it's like, actually, these things that we keep adding and adding onto our life are often barriers between our senses. Like I recently became aware of how much I am missing around me when I constantly have my headphones in. And like living in New York City, I genuinely feel like the entire time that I've lived here, I have felt like I have to have my headphones when I leave the house. Otherwise, it's unbearable. And sometimes it is. Like sometimes the louds, sometimes the sounds are way too loud, but I'm missing the actual sound of the people around me having conversations, the birds chirping. But by putting my headphones in, and I know I should be careful saying this because I have a podcast that I want y'all to continue listening to, but by doing that, I'm completely shutting myself off from the life around me. And I actually wrote a little personal essay on Substack recently about something that I am calling poetry watching. It's like people watching, but you're specifically looking for little pieces of life, little things that people say that are poetic. And it was inspired by this TikTok that I saw from Charlie that had the subtitle Hearing Poetry in Everyday Life. And I'm just gonna play the TikTok.
Have you ever heard like a catchy little turn of phrase inside of a conversation you're having and it gets stuck in your head as if it's like an actual song lyric or something? Like my dad was recently telling me about a party he had been to that had one of those nacho tables, you know, where they cover the whole table in nachos. It's sickening, but it's sickening. I'm interested. Anyways, he was describing it to me and he goes, "Oh my God, Charlie, there were nachos for days. It was nacho night." And that struck me. I was like, "Dad, do you know what you just said?" Because you did say it in iambic pentameter. There were nachos for days, it was nacho night. Robert Frost might have written such a couplet had he lived to see Tostitos scoops. Just the other day, I passed a woman on the street who was on the phone. All that I heard of her conversation was, "And I'm sad that we didn't get to go to Boise." That's a country song, and I'm sad that we didn't get to go to Boise. Like, so brief, but it tells such a rich story. Love, loss, adventure, remorse, the false promise of the American West. I'm sad too, honestly. The one that sticks with me the most, though, is this time I was at a bagel place, and there was a mom there with her 2 young sons. She's trying to, like, wrangle them up, get them ready to leave, and she goes, "JP and Peter, did you finish your OJ?" And my world stopped. JP and Peter, did you finish your OJ? JP and Peter, did you finish your OJ? There's something beautiful about it. There's something beautifully circular about it. Like, honestly, it's a Nikki bar. JP and Peter, did you finish your OJ? All these bitches is her sons, JP and Peter being the bitches.
So after seeing that TikTok, I had a little experience in the park, and a couple days later, I wrote this. I want words playing like music in my head like that, and I like to think I don't have to find them on a page. So I make a plan with the person I walk with. I think of it as poetry watch, people watching with the express intent of hearing accidental prose. Not necessarily today, though, I add, because my ass cheeks are sweating and I'd like to find my way back to an AC as soon as possible. Moments later, moving towards the park's exit, we see a little boy run in the opposite direction of his family. His father, with a little boy's scooter in hand, yells, "This way," but the boy keeps going. After a few moments with siblings trying to convince him to change course, his father exasperatedly says, "You're using a lot of energy to go in the wrong direction." I lock eyes with the person I'm with immediately. "There's one," he says. For a second, I feel powerful, like I conjured up this moment with his father. I willed the casual wisdom he projected across the sidewalk into existence. More likely, though, there are pockets of poetry in every moment if you attune your attention to them. It's exhilarating to have this made clear to me just moments after bringing the idea of poetry watching up. The day before, I watched as a toddler's attention got stuck on a crushed Pepsi can. His mother cooed, "Which way?" effectively asking the kid a question he was completely uninterested in. "No touching, that's yucky," she said to him as his hands reached for the trash, hungry for all of its sticky shine. This moment felt like poetry in a different way. Poetry that's not spoken but seen. Poetry before words. I start a section in my digital garden to store these moments. I'm struck by the similarity in the first two. The parents making futile attempts to lead the children making their own decisions, exerting their own energy, even if it's a waste, towards whatever it was they were actually interested in. I wonder, if I keep track of these pockets of poetry, what will they tell me over time? I wonder if the similarity of these moments is some sort of clue, a clue to what mystery I'm not entirely sure. One thing I have learned about myself in the first few days since I started thinking about this is how immediately children bring me to the present moment. It's like their attention and aliveness is contagious. I'm enamored by this idea of poetry watching, yet mostly I forget to keep up with it. I've got earbuds in. I'm consuming content on the way to the grocery store instead of consuming my life. As Joan Didion says in her essay on keeping a notebook, we forget all too soon the things we thought we could never forget. We forget the loves and the betrayals alike, forget what we whispered and what we screamed, forget who we were. And those moments that feel so small are actually so packed with details and dialogue we'll be remiss to forget in the years to come. She says, "You see, I still have the scenes, but I no longer perceive myself among those present, no longer could even improvise the dialogue. Let us put the poetry in our pockets. Then there will be no need to improvise our picture of the past." Okay, hi, day 2 of recording. So when I wrote that, I was thinking just about poetry and poetry watching. I was not thinking about this in relation to sensuality, but I actually think that's an exercise that really does help you tap into sensuality in some way, because it requires you to get in touch with your senses and refuse to drown out things like your sense of hearing and seeing what's around you. Like, if you don't think of yourself as a poet, that's fine. Don't think of yourself as a poet, but think of yourself as the person that has the capacity to see, hear, feel, touch, and taste the poetry around you. You don't have to invent, you can just see. Little throwback to an old episode. But just now I was on a walk in the park and I was reading my book, and this man walks by, he's walking his dog, and he says good morning, I say good morning back, and then his dog like flops over in the grass, so he's standing there for a while. And he's saying good morning to everyone that walks by. And I watch as 4 people walk by him, and he says good morning to all of them, and none of them respond. Not because they're bad people, but because they have their headphones in. And I'm not knocking them for that. If this guy would have said good morning to me 5 minutes before when I had my headphones in, I might not have said good morning back either. I am very aware of how much living in a densely populated city can make it feel like in order to survive the day-to-day, you do sort of have to shut yourself down from the full range of your senses because the subway is so loud, the smells are so gross, there are people yelling gross things at you on the sidewalk. But that's why I think it's especially important to have intentional time carved out for yourself that maybe feels like a little game that you can play so that you can access that sense of sensuality. And I think that in order to access the state of being that is sensuality, we will also have to come in contact with our shame. And there's a TikTok video by a creator named Carlitos who talked about an experience that he had when he was younger, where he was watching one of his aunts like play the drums, and he was super inspired by the way that she was conducting herself and thought at the time that he was really mesmerized by the fact that she was playing the drums. But as the years went by, he realized what I was seeing was a way of being that I didn't understand or have access to at the time because of shame in being who I was. That way of being was sensuality, slowness, presence, the bravery to enjoy the experience of being in your own body and to show that to people. And I think that in part is really important about showing it to people. I think when we think of sensuality, we think of sexiness because it is a way of being that most of us reserve to our most intimate, private moments. The willingness to close your eyes and really taste your food, to move around slower than might be socially acceptable. I mean, like thinking back to the first example that I used of walking slowly down the street with the music that I was listening to. I did feel weird about that as I was doing that. It felt a bit like fighting against my own instincts to move as quickly as possible. Carlito says that when his aunt was playing the drums, she would close her eyes and be so lost in the moment. He says, I remember aching for that. And this is why sensuality is not just like a straightforward thing that you can collapse into like 10 easy steps for how to be more sensual. Like, I think living in this way asks you to confront your own feelings of shame around your body. And I am never going to act like I am the authority in that realm. I think that's a highly personal thing to walk through. But Andrea Gibson did one of those YouTube interviews where they like slowly take off articles of clothing as they ask very vulnerable questions. And one of the questions that they ask was, what's your deepest source of shame? Which is such an intense question. But Andrea was talking about how throughout their life, their body was one of their biggest sources of shame. Just this fear of looking sick, like going through Lyme's disease and just feeling this intense shame about the idea that they look sick. But nearing the end of their life, they said, I don't think there's anything I'm ashamed of with my body at this point because I can't believe I have a body and I feel the treasure of it in a way I haven't. Shame has really sort of melted off of me in a way, and I'm only emotional because of how many years I know that wasn't the case and how I know for most of the world that's not the case. So I'm not going to take this video in the direction of how to move through shame about your body. I think that could be an entirely separate episode. But that's again why I think that it's important to separate this feeling of sensuality from sexiness. Because I don't think you have to wait until you feel sexy to feel sensual. There are intentional practices that can help you get you into your body and really feel all of your senses that don't require that of you. The poetry watching thing is one that I really like right now. Another one that I have been doing throughout my life without ever connecting it to sensuality until I started looking into this episode and realizing like, oh, that actually does immediately make me feel more grounded in my body and connected to all of my senses, is this exercise where if I'm feeling like particularly disconnected in the world, I will pretend that I am in the first few shots of a movie, that everything I do is very intentionally done to set the scene for what's about to happen. I mean, think about like any movie that you love. Usually there's a few shots at the beginning that are very intentionally laid out. You don't usually go straight into dialogue, but it's often these sort of mundane but very intentional shots that set us up for what's about to come, but they don't have any baggage because you have no idea what's about to happen. The sound design is very intentionally laid out. Every single shot is very intentionally planned. You might see a hand putting down a water glass or someone opening a refrigerator or feet hiking up a mountain. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, you're just seeing and hearing what's happening. And for me, anytime that I play this kind of game of make-believe, it plants me in the moment because suddenly I'm actually hearing all of the sounds of everything that I do. If I'm typing on my computer, I'm hearing the like click-clack of the typing in the way that I wasn't hearing before. If I'm walking down the street, I'm seeing the faces of the people in front of me. So that one's a fun one for me. And then another one is taking smaller bites of your food. And this is not at all for any sort of like body thing. This has nothing to do with trying to eat less or anything like that. It is so that you're tasting your food more. I remember I used to do this when I was younger. I used to have Eggo, the chocolate chip Eggo waffles in the morning. And I would ask my parents, this was before I had like the fine motor skills to cut my own waffles, but I would ask them to cut them in the smallest pieces possible because I wanted the experience of eating it to last longer. And that's like the intentional act of savoring something. You have to slow down to let it happen. And in Heaven Sent Honey's video about sensualism, she says, for a sensualist, time is discarded. Time is the enemy of leisure, the enemy of ecstasis. And I think I understand what she means by this. I think that at the core of it, it's about being present in the moment, which I agree with that. But I kind of think that framing it as time being the enemy makes it so that it feels like something you need to fight against instead of something you need to live in. And with Andrea Gibson's thoughts about mortality and how life is so beautiful because of the brevity of life swirling around in my head, I actually think that having this keen awareness of the fact that you don't have unlimited time is the thing that makes it possible to savor the time that you have. And I'm going to read one of Andrea Gibson's poems called Tincture. Again, highly recommend that you go and actually listen to them read it because that's going to be much more powerful. But I want you to just hear how many senses Andrea had to employ to write this poem. And this poem was one that they wrote when they were really in the thick of Lyme disease. And someone told them, you know, when you die, your soul actually misses your body. And I listened to an interview where Andrea was saying they don't actually know if that's what they spiritually believe, but it was an idea that really stuck with them. So they wrote this poem, and I'm going to try my best not to cry while I read it. Okay. Imagine when a human dies, the soul misses the body, actually grieves the loss of its hands and all they could hold, misses the throat closing shy, reading out loud on the first day of school. Imagine the soul misses the stubbed toe, the loose tooth, the funny bone. The soul still asks, why does the funny bone do that? It's just weird. Imagine the soul misses the thirsty garden cheeks watered by grief, misses how the body could sleep through a dream. What else can sleep through a dream? What else can laugh? What else can wrinkle the smile's photograph? Imagine the soul misses each falling eyelash waiting to be a wish, misses the wrist screaming away the blade. The soul misses the lisp, the stutter, the limp. The soul misses the holy bruise blue from that army of blood rushing to the wound's side. When a human dies, the soul searches the universe for something blushing, something shaking in the cold, something that scars, sweeps the universe for patience worn thin, the last nerve fighting for its life, the voice box aching to be heard. The soul misses the way the body would hold another body and not be two bodies, but one pleading God doubled in grace. The soul misses how the mind told the body, you have fallen from grace. And the body said, erase every scripture that doesn't have a pulse. There isn't a single page in the Bible that can wince, that can clumsy, that can freckle, that can hunger. Imagine the soul misses hunger, emptiness, rage. The fist that was never taught to curl, curled. The teeth that were never taught to clench, clenched. The body that was never taught to make love, made love. Like a hungry ghost digging its way out of the grave. The soul misses the unforever of old age, the skin that no longer fits. The soul misses every single day the body was sick, the now it forced, the here it built from the fever. Fever is how the body prays, how it burns and begs for another average day. The soul misses the legs creaking up the stairs, misses the fear that climbed up the vocal cords to curse the wheelchair. The soul misses what the body could not let go. What else could hold on that tightly to everything? What else could hear the chain of a swing set and fall to its knees? What else could touch a screen door and taste lemonade? What else could come back from a war and not come back, but still try to live, still try to lullaby? When a human dies, the soul moves through the universe trying to describe how a body trembles when it's lost, softens when it's safe, how a wound would heal given nothing but time. Do you understand? Nothing in space can imagine it. No comet, no nebula, no ray of light can fathom the landscape of awe, the heat of shame, the fingertips pulling the first gray hair and throwing it away. I can't imagine it, the stars say. Tell us again about goosebumps. Tell us again about pain. Nice light episode for us today. I just love Andrea Gibson. And if you made it to the end of this episode, I'm sure you do too. I hope we can honor their life by savoring our own. And if you have any little exercises that you like to do to get in contact with your sense of sensuality, please put them in the comments. I would love to hear them. And to lighten the mood before we go, while I was doing some reading on sensuality and the senses this week, I did learn that catfish have taste buds on their butt, and some butterflies have light receptors, sort of eyes, not really eyes, in their genitals. Love that. Anyway, I'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye.